Hello again, everybody. As Ogre Battle is a gift that keeps on giving, on this occasion we will talk about one of the most important features, and that is the class system. So, we will try and review each and every class available in the game, given that if we don't know these classes well, it's kinda hard to make good strategies and beat the game without knowing the pros and cons of using the characters that form your squads, and also characters that you have used and abused on most of the game. So, without any further delay, let's jump into it. We need to know that in this game there are many classes that are divided into several subgroups, and each group has different characteristics and features that we will review and that will allow this game to be more variable, and also will make the progress in the story a lot more interesting. So, we will start with the first group of classes. Those are the human male classes. It's the biggest group of all the classes that we have in this game. Classes. Okay, the first class that we are gonna see here is the fighter. The fighter is the default of the human male kind, and they are not good, they are not bad, they are just the default. So this is where you will start with, and you will notice when you start your new game that most of your characters belong to this class. We can say that, well, every time that a character in this game gains a level, they have bonuses in their HP, their strength, their agility, their intelligence, and also they experience a cost increase. Okay? Also, something important that we need to know is that depending on the version of the game that you're playing, your classes might have different names, and that's okay. That's every version used the same swords, but they gave different interpretations to the translation, so that's fine and good. The important part is that you're playing with the same class and with the same stats. That doesn't change. Also, the name of the attacks differ from one version to another. In this occasion, I like the interface of the Sega Saturn version a lot better. So I allowed myself to take screenshots of the stats of every class. The levels that you will see here not necessarily match to the requirements, because a lot of the screenshots I took are from the stage Dragon's Haven, and they tweak the levels of the troops a little bit so you can have ultimate classes a lot earlier than you're supposed to. So, we will see that the HP gain of this class, for being the most basic one, is not really bad. You gain between 5 to 7 extra HP, extra hit points every time this character levels up. Their strength is low, as it is the agility. Only the casters in this game have lower agility than the fighters, and the intelligence is also the lowest. Okay, so my advice is you need to upgrade this version as soon as possible. Hopefully not before and not past level 5. What happens? The first class that gets available for the first class change for this class, it's in level 4 to become a wizard. However, the game gives you enough wizards in your initial troops as it is, so I would recommend never turn this class into any magic based class, because again, their intelligence is very low, so you wouldn't take full advantage of it. Also, something important that we need to know is that most classes are more powerful the earlier they are recruited. Okay, so This is a physical class that is supposed to be in the front row. We have two. They perform 2 slash attacks in the front, and if we have them in the back row, they only have 1 slash attack. Okay, they are supposed to go mostly on plain type terrain, and they are not suited to lead a squad. The next class we have is the Knight, and we can tell that based on the attack, this would be like the logical upgrade, straight upgrade from the fighter. Well, yes and no. Yes, it uses the same attacks. It has actually the same kind of attacks, and the strategy that you want to use with these guys is the same that you would use with the fighters. This is basically an upgraded fighter, and not much more than that. They are not bad. They are just average. And as you can see, their status gains, if we compare them with the fighter, are not really that much better. They have the same agility, they have the same low intelligence, they increase the cost, but something important about this class is that, well, it has the same HP, and it has just a little more strength gain every time you level up. You can become a knight when a fighter is on level 5 and onwards. You need a charisma over 50 and an alignment over 50 also to transition into this class. Depending on how you're playing this game, usually you would want to follow a route where your troops have a higher alignment and higher charisma, so you will have abundance of these guys. These can actually lead a squad, so and they are really not bad, especially compared to other classes. And the reason you would want to have them is not because the knight is a particularly good class, it's because they are gonna become, when the time comes, when they reach level 15 or so, they're gonna become a really amazing class. That it's the one that we are gonna talk right now. And that class is the Paladin. The Paladin is a knight over level 50 or above, or a charisma of over 60 points or above, and an alignment of 70 or above. We can see that their HP growth is a lot better. Their strength is the same as the knight. Their agility is the same. The intelligence, however, is higher. And that's because, if you noticed, in their attacks, they have an extra slash attack in the front, and in the back, they have a healing attack, a healing skill, rather. The reason of that is because, well, Paladins are supposed to be the ultimate holy class in this game for humans. But given that the intelligence growth from the time they were fighters and knights is not good, so their status, intelligence status is gonna be low. Don't waste your time putting them in the row. They are supposed to be physical units, so they should remain in the front. However, and there is an exception of this rule, there are a kind of enemies in this, units in this game, that those are the undeads, and those troops are completely vulnerable to holy attacks. And if you, according to how you set your tactic settings in battle, the healing spell in this class, the Paladin, instead of healing one of your units, it will use the healing to attack every undead unit in the opposition, and they will erase them. Not just harm them, they will erase them. They kill them immediately. Okay, so that's the only time when you would want to have a Paladin in the back, and only if you don't have a healer, a proper healer in your troop, in your squad, I mean. Okay. Other than that, Paladins are really good. They become fairly reliable, and they tend to have a rather decent accuracy in their attacks. And the fact that you can raise several of them, and that also they attack 3 times per fight in the front, that's also pretty remarkable. Plus they have a very good HP. Next class, the Vampyre. That's something that nobody would really expect to see, but in order to get a Vampyre, randomly, sometimes you get, after a fight, you can get an item called a Blood Kiss. The change differs between the versions that you are playing. In Super Nintendo, that's called a Blood, that's it. If you use that on a Knight, or in another class that we're gonna review in a bit, that's called the Evil One, or the Black Knight, it will become a class called Vampyre. Now, on paper, this class sounds amazing. In the practice, not so much. Why? Because this class has several features. One, it only works during the night, which is half of the time in the map that you are playing. And usually, if you are planning correctly, you shouldn't stay in a map that long. So chances are you are not gonna really find that much use for this guy. And during the day, it becomes literally a walking coffin. And it will make an attack. If you independently, if they are in the front or in the back row, they will have an attack called Sleep or Sleepwalker, which literally does nothing. But in return, if he's attacked, unless he's attacked with holy attacks, he is invulnerable to pretty much everything. But what's the point about defending so well if you can attack, right? And in this game, that is absolutely true. It doesn't matter how tanky a character is. If they can't cause damage, they are pretty much useless, in my opinion. You want to get rid of your enemies as fast as possible. Okay? Now, what attacks does this guy have? In the front, it has an attack that's called Life Force, which what that does is it drains the HP from one of the enemy units twice in a fight. And if you place it in the back, it will cast an attack called Charm, which doesn't hurt the enemy, but it has a chance of charming the enemy, which means it will have a chance of turning against its own allies. Okay. Something important about this Vampyre, if we see the status bonuses, it has a pretty decent strength, but in this case it's completely useless because he doesn't have any physical attacks. It has the same agility, but it has lower HP growth, and in return it has a way higher intelligence growth, gaining between 4 to 6 intelligence points every time he levels up. And also he becomes incredibly expensive. Every time he levels up, it costs 250 goth more over their overall price. And also, if you see here, you can see that he can recruit, you can barely see it, but he can recruit a class called Werewolf. That is a huge plus, and the only reason you would want one of these guys. Okay? The next class is the Samurai. These guys become available at level 7 when your charisma is over 50 and your alignment over 50 also. Same requirements almost as the Knight, with the difference that you get these guys a couple of levels later. What's the difference between this guy and the Knight? Well, the HP growth is the same. Their strength bonuses are exactly the same also. Their agility are the same, but their intelligence is slightly higher. Okay, and it's also a little more expensive, and also, again, as I said before, it arrives 2 levels later than the knight. And their attacks are similar, except that in the front you get an attack called Deadly Sheath. In the PlayStation and the Super Nintendo versions, the attack is called Slash, I think, or Slice, one of those two. But it's basically very, very similar to the knight's attack. It's cutting attack using a sword. It's a physical attack, and it's pretty reliable. And in the back, it has an attack called Sonic Boom, and in the Super Nintendo version, it's called Iainuki. And what it does, it launches a huge sonic wave or power wave to an enemy. It's a ranged attack. It's very, very powerful, and also it's in fact it's so powerful that it reflects part of the damage to your samurai also. It's very good, it's very reliable, but it's a double-edged sword, so use it carefully. I usually prefer to keep these guys in the front too. Okay. One of the strategies I like to use, especially to benefit for the intelligence extra point, is I turn. Given that these guys are almost the same as the knights, I like to turn my knights into these guys when I have the chance, and then if I want paladins, I return them to being knights, and then I can make them paladins when they reach level 15. Okay, samurais become later a very an amazing class called the Samurai Master in Super Nintendo. In the and in the PlayStation, they are called the same way. In the Sega Saturn, they are called Daimyos. Okay. If we could review something important, something interesting is, if you have never heard that word, is a daimyo was a feudal lord in the ancient Japan, kind of like a shogun, but having a less authority than that. But okay, enough of the nerd note here. The difference between the Samurai Master and the Samurai is that the number of attacks in the front increases by 1, an extra attack. That's amazing. And in the back, it still has the same Iainuki or Sonic Boom attack. And if we check the stats, they remain exactly the same, but he becomes a little more expensive. So just having an extra attack is a reason enough for us to just turn all our samurais into Samurai Masters. You won't regret it. Oh, and also the difference between these two classes is that the requirements to become a Samurai Master, they are slightly higher. You need a higher charisma, 60 plus points, and an even higher alignment of over 70. Okay. Next class, we have the Wildman, or what? How is it called in the other versions of the game and in the Sega Saturn? And by the other versions, I mean the Tactic Ogre games. Is the Berserker. Basically, what this guy is an evil-leaning knight. Personally, I think this class sucks, and the reason why it sucks is because it's still, even though it's kinda tanky, it's slower. And because if it's slower, it tends to miss, which I don't really get why, but it tends to miss their attacks a lot. Okay? So it's not very reliable. Their intelligence is low as well. They have a little more HP, but they really, personally, I don't like them, and I don't waste my time turning them. If anything, I prefer to turn my characters into ninjas for very specific reason. The only way you would want to have Berserkers is because their next class, although it's not precisely useful or as powerful as the Paladin or the Samurai Master, it's still fairly cool looking and yeah, it still can deal some damage. especially if you are leaning more to the evil side and your characters have a lower alignment. And that class is the Evil One, or also called the Black Knights. In the front they only have 2 attacks, which is kind of disappointing considering that this is an ultimate fighter class. Only uses the attack twice, and in the back it changes the physical attack for a magical ranged attack, which is Firebolts, Fire Elemental. But by the time that you get these knights, you get them at level 16. By the time you get these knights, if you have been playing the game the way you're supposed to have a lot of magic users in your team. So this guy pretends to be a jack and all trades, and he's a master of none. Personally, is not a favorite of mine. The only reason you would want to have one is to turn this guy. This and the knight are the only ones who can become vampires in the game if you happen to bump into a blood kiss that is a drop from one of your enemies. Okay, it's not in reason. Long story short, I don't think this is a very worth getting class. The next one, we have the Beastman, or also called a Beast Tamer. Okay, you thought that the Berserker or Wildman was disappointing? Well, this one falls shortly behind. It only has 2 attacks. It doesn't the only advantage it has is that it doesn't really matter if you put them in the front or in the back row. They have the same attack and causing pretty much the same damage and the same amount of times also. 2 attacks in the front, 2 attacks in the back. Their status growth is not really the best, but it's very similar to the Knight and the Berserker. This is more like the neutral class. The difference is that you can make, if you have beast classes in your troops, you can team them up with these guys, and the beasts can perform slightly better, which in my opinion it's still not enough to justify them. Also, their alignment requirement is kind of tricky, because if you saw the previous ones, you can see that the Knight has a wider range. You can, if your alignment is over 50 and all the way up, you can turn them into Paladins with no issue. Or if you are a Berserker, 49 and down, no limitations. But in the case of the Beastman, you have a range. Now, what happens in this game is that it's very easy to fall into a way that once your characters start losing or gaining alignment, they tend to go either all the way up or all the way down. It's very hard to keep your character's alignment in between exactly where you need them. That's pretty tricky. Okay. The next class is the Beastmaster, which is, guess what? Exactly the same thing as the Beastman. It only has a slight upgrade on the strength stat, and other than that is equally mediocre. It's pretty hard to miss this class because the range of alignment that you need to transform one of these guys is pretty low. Okay. Now, what is the advantage that you can get is that it can recruit more advanced beast classes that sometimes can be useful. Personally, I am not very fond of them. And the amount of attacks remain the same. The only advantage is that you can become a Beastman. This is supposed to be an ultimate fighter form, and I say, and I quote, because we are gonna see that there are still 2 classes that you can become using a Beastmaster. You can become a Beastmaster when your Beastman is at level 12 or above, Charisma over 60, and alignment between 10 and 50 points. The next class is the Dragoner. If you notice, the aspect of the Dragoner differs a lot from the Beastman. The Beastman and Beastmaster are bald guys with beards and everything, and they look like they are 70 years old and above. The Dragoner looks like a young girl. So it's I won't mess with the aspect. I'm not even a big fan of aesthetics of this class, but something important about this class is absolutely nothing. You can become a Dragoner if you happen to bump into an item, which is also a random drop, called the Stone of Dragons. And what it does is your Beastmaster becomes a Dragoner. And look at this. Look at those status. Those stats, I mean. The HP in the Beastmaster was better, and so was the strength gain. The only advantage that the Dragon Tamer has over the Beastmaster is that it has a slight increase in the intelligence stat. Other than that, it's a lot more expensive. But what the Dragon Tamer brings to your troops is that it's able to recruit dragons. Okay? And dragons actually are I would consider them a beast class that brings a lot of power to your troops. Okay, but other than that, the Beast Tamer, I mean, is not a very good class. If you see the attacks, it has 2 physical attacks in front and in the back. And believe it or not, this is not even their final form. So the next class is the Dragon Master, and this is the ultimate form of the Beastman family. Now, what's the difference between the Dragon Master and why should you get one if you can? Is not because of the crappy stats that it has, or the poor growth that it has in all the other, because guess what? Their strength gain, it's still lower than the Dragon Master. Their agility is higher. Their intelligence remains the same as the Dragoner. It's even more expensive than the previous classes. And look how hard it is to get the right alignment range to become one of these guys. It's a very narrow space that you have in your alignment. That means that you have to spend most of the game with that character killing the right kind of troops, the right kind of enemies the whole time. And remember also that you needed a way lower alignment to become a Beastmaster in the first place. So it's, to be honest with you, even though they look very cool and they play they have a very interesting niche within your troops, to be honest with you, it's not a game changer. There are better classes, literally almost every other one. So I really won't bother. The only reason I would have to have one is if you are a real fan of having dragons, or if you just want to brag about how lucky you were that you got a Stone of Dragons and take your character all the way there. Other than that, this is a character that didn't have much thought when it was planned. It's not a magical character, and guess what? Look at those attacks. In the front, it has a physical attack, and that's fine and well. In the back, though, it changed the 2 slashes from the Dragon Tamer into 2 range ice attacks that only affect 1 enemy unit. given how low your intelligence is here, it's absolutely not worth it. Okay, but the other advantage that it has over the Dragoner is that it can recruit higher category of dragons into your troops. Okay, but again, you get him pretty late in the game. By the time you reach level 20, you're already probably a third away of the game from ending it, so I really wouldn't bother. The next class is the Wizard, and this one in particular is a very, very, very interesting and important class in the game, and is absolutely worth it. For starters, is the only one of two branches in this family that can use magical attacks, and it's the only one who can use multi-element magics, meaning that the magical attacks that this troop will use are directly linked to your enemy's weaknesses. It will always attack with the magic with the element that your enemy is more susceptible to. Okay, it has the lowest HP growth of every fighter. It has the lowest strength and the lowest agility of any of the fighter groups, but has the highest intelligence growth along with the Vampyre in the whole family. So this is the reason why you shouldn't turn any of your fighters into a wizard. It's because your fighters are mostly suited for physical classes. The only way that you would justify having wizards is you get two really good ones in the game as recruits. They are given to you in different stages, and also you have bosses in the game. Not bosses in the game. You have special characters in the game. That are able to recruit wizards by themselves. And I'm sorry, that's my dog, and she tends to be a little uptight sometimes. Okay, so wizards are only worth recruiting if you can get them from very low levels. Other than that, their intelligence growth is gonna be very low. Once you can get them with the right stats, they are amazing, and they can become the most powerful classes in the game. And the reason why, I will tell you right now. The wizard itself is pretty good, but only at the very beginning of the game. The next class, however, that's where the true pain for your enemies start. This is the Mage, which is a wizard with a lower alignment. And again, if you look at it, the requirements, it has getting charisma over 50 is pretty easy. You just have to kill enemies that are on your level or slightly above. But getting your lower alignment, that's a really, really tricky thing to do, and you have to play very carefully, trying to kill characters with very, very high alignment, like clerics, knights, or enemies that are directly under your level, but not so low that you will start losing charisma. And if your alignment is between 10 and 30, and your charisma over 50, by the time you reach level 10, you can become this amazing unit. Now you might see, well, how is it amazing? It only has 2 hits on the front, which they are never supposed to be there because that's physical attacks. It's laughable. And it only has 1 magic attack. Well, here's the thing. That magic attack that you see there, it's an area of effect spell, which affects every single unit and every single enemy in the field. So that's And that's not even his final form. But we will see. If you are lucky enough and you can find an item called the Undead Stuff, that is usually an enemy drop, or you can get one in when you liberate certain stages. They are very, very hard to find. You will be able to turn the mage into this class called a Sorcerer or a Necromancer, depending on the version you are playing. And you can tell that it changes the extremely mediocre hate attack that is physical for 2 magic attacks in the front and 2 magic attacks in the back. However, you are only supposed to keep this guy in the back. Why is that? Because the magic attack that it has in front is the magic attack that your wizard had, and that's ranged. That means only it affects 1 enemy every time you use it. And the 2 attacks that are in the back, those are the kind of attacks that your mage has, which are they attack all the enemies at the same time. So it's a no-brainer. You have to keep them in the back. Their stats are not really that good. Their strength, agility, and HP are still horrible. But their intelligence is still the same as in the case of the mage and the wizard. However, and this is why you shouldn't really think anything about the stats, is because this is not even the wizard's final form. Sadly, it's also extremely chance-based, but you need another item called the Undead Ring, and you use that one on the Necromancer or Sorcerer, and you get this guy. And this guy is, in my opinion, one, if not the most overpowered and powerful and overpowered unit in the whole game. Why is that? You might say the stats are horrible. Well, this guy, for some unholy reason, gains an amazing resistance to every attack of every element except holy. And also, it changes the 2 magic attacks in the back that the Necromancer had for 3 magic attacks that are area of effect ranged. And in the front it has 3 chances to attack with an attack called Chilling Look in the Sega Saturn version. In the Super Nintendo and PlayStation is called Cold Eye, and that's, oddly enough, is a holy elemental attack. But that's not what you want to... That's not how you want to use your Lich. You want to keep them in the back so they can obliterate the enemy. It doesn't matter if it's a stage boss, if it's... They are simply amazing. And you will have the chance to get at least one of this in the game, because the game itself will give you at least one undead staff and at least 1 undead ring. So before the end of the game, you will have the chance to at least have one of these guys in your troop, and if you're slightly lucky, you will have more. Trust me. But this is an awesome troop, and also, let me tell you, they look pretty badass. The next class is not really a personal favorite of mine, and I have read in several... There are mixed reviews about this class depending on who you talk to and what guide do you read. There are people who really worship these guys. I personally don't really like them. Why is that? Because even though if it's a rather basic unit that you can get at a really low level, I mean, your fighter has to be level 6. You still have to have a charisma over 50, but your alignment, if you manage to screw the alignment of your wizard and you dropped it below 10, it won't be able to become a mage. Well, these guys can still save you, because it doesn't matter if your alignment is 0, you can still become one of these guys. And why would you want to do that? And why is it a kind of a consolation prize for not having a mage? Well, it's a hybrid class, meaning that you can have... They are meant to be in the front, but they can still perform fairly well in the back. In the front they have an attack called Shuriken, that is a physical attack, and they can attack 3 times in a fight. However, they tend to miss a lot, just like the Berserker does. That's why they have an extra attack, because chances are you will never see the 3 attacks connecting in the same fight. However, in the back row, they have an attack called Ninjutsu. What is it? It is a magical attack that works exactly like the wizards. That means that it will hit... It's ranged, that means will attack one specific unit in your enemy squad, and also will use one of 3 different elements to hit the one closest to the enemy's weakness. Okay. Their stats growth is not that bad, really. And at level 15, these little guys will become a Ninja Master, or how they call them in the Sega Saturn version, a Shinobi. Okay, what's the difference? It's pretty similar to what happens with the Mage. It keeps the 3 Shuriken attacks in the front. Their strength remains the same. It has a higher HP growth, a higher agility, and actually an increase in their intelligence stat. Now, the 2 ninjutsu attacks that it had in the back become only 1 when you changing into a Shinobi or Ninja Master. But what's the difference? Is that just like when you change into Mage, this becomes an area of effect attack. It attacks every single enemy in the enemy troop, in the enemy group. And that's actually pretty cool. It's not good enough for a Mage, but it will certainly be a pretty interesting unit, and a lot useful to have nevertheless. Okay, and now we are going to the final class in this branch, and that is the Dollmage. Now, if you messed so badly your mages, or your wizard's alignment, it went so high and you can't find a way to bring it back down, then these guys are the answer to your prayers. And also is the other magic user within the fighter branch, and is the good alignment counterpart, the good guy counterpart of I'm sorry, that word is tricky for me, of the wizards and mages. And this is why it has a lot more forgiving alignment. It has still very, very decent stats, not as high in the intelligence department as the wizard and the mage, but it has a saving grace that the mage doesn't really have, and that's from the very beginning the Dollmage, and later the Dollmaster. They have an attack that is called Acid Cloud. It is a magic based, it's intelligence based. I mean, it's a neutral physical attack, but based on magic that affects the entire enemy unit. Okay, unlike the wizard that it was only a ranged attack that attacked the witness, this one uses a neutral physical magical attack. And that's actually pretty good news for most of the enemy, and usually enough for most of the enemies of the game. They make the Dollmaster and Dollmage a force to be reckoned with. And personally, although it's not my favorite magical class, it's still really, really good, especially if you were not lucky enough to find enough undead staffs and undead rings in the game to turn your mages into Liches and Sorcerers. This one has an extra attack by default, so and also it has the not much saving grace that it works pretty well when paired with golems. Golems are beast classes, and I personally hate them with a passion. So that's something I wouldn't take into consideration. It has better agility than the wizard. The strength is equally pathetic though. And in the front it has 2 physical attacks. In Super Nintendo and PlayStation it's called Doll attack. In the back it has the magical Acid Cloud attack. You can become a Dollmage if you use Soldier level 5 and above with an alignment over 50. Charisma over 50 and alignment between 35 and 70. And in level 15, this guy becomes... level 14 becomes the Enchanter or Dollmaster, which requires a charisma of over 60 and an alignment between 50 and 80. It has an increase in their agility stat, and their intelligence is still slightly below than the wizard, but what makes this guy unique is that other than being fairly easy to get, these guys get 2 our area of effect attack. It's still the same Acid Cloud that is physical, but it manages to use it twice instead of once, and that's it. That is a huge life quality enhancement for this class, and again makes a fairly consolation prize for the ones that are unlucky enough not to get sorcerers or leeches in their unit. Okay, and this is the last class in our branch that we are gonna talk on this video. And this concludes the first part of this topic. Given the high amount of classes that this game has, I have decided to divide it into 2 different videos. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to post in the comment section below. And also, if you find that this topic was interesting enough, give us a like and consider subscribing to our channel. See you very soon!